Welcome, Dinis. It's a great pleasure to have you at this Ethiack webinar. So, Dinis, tell us a bit about yourself. What you do, where you come from, what you do on your daily life. Tell us.
Okay. All right. So I'm a Portuguese living in London. I've been here for probably 26, 27 years. I was actually born in Lisbon, lived in Algarve for a long time, had a lot of coding from when I was a kid. I like to say I'm from the Spectrum generation and the Amiga generation, coding away since a kid. I was actually in a band. I was in a rock band in Algarve. Then I moved to England and I was doing music stuff, and I kind of gravitated more into technology, and then I kind of gravitated more into security. So I'm kind of from the generation that bought Hacking Exposed, for the ones who know, the Red Book, version 1, like the first edition, and then literally went, let's try all this out on the internet. So it's really cool, right? Like I've learned it out, I played around, and I've done just about almost everything in security. I kind of, because I could code, I kind of gravitated through application security. So I was then gravitated to OWASP, which is a great community, the Open Web Application Security Project. I was very involved. I was not the founder, but I was reasonably early on. Mark Curfew brought me on board. And then I was very, involved in there. I eventually became a board member, just did a bunch of stuff, learned a lot. And I have to say that I tried to become technical for a long time because I always felt that it was a good advantage that I could actually understand. I could code, I do that. And I kind of chose strategically to also go more into senior roles later on in my career. And that's kind of what happened. Eventually, I became head off, and then eventually I became CISO. So now I've been like CISO for about almost 7 years, something like that, in multiple companies. And it's a great journey, right? And I've been a CTO a couple of other companies. So at the moment, I kind of have 2 roles. I'm the CISO for Holland Barrett, which is a really big sort of retailer. We have about 600 stores in the UK, in Ireland, some stuff in Netherlands. We sell wellness products. It's a typical retailer. And then I'm also the chief scientist for a kind of UK 10-year startup that does a lot of great businesses, especially with the US, with all the agencies. So it's really cool, right, to work with all the 3-letter and acronyms agencies. But that's on the defense side. So that's a technology that makes files safe. So the joke is when James Bond needs to open a file, antivirus is not just good enough. So Glasswall is part of a CDR. It's called Content Disarmament and Construction Technology that kind of makes a file safe. So it's really cool. So I kind of have these 2 roles, a lot, a bit on Glasswall, a lot on Holland Barrett, and again, try to make the world safer and better.
Awesome. That's really interesting that you mentioned that you had a rock band as well. The music
is
very
I was a drummer. I was a drummer on it.
I also have a music background before, hacking and all this stuff. I think the creativity is very connected, like a lot of us that work and have at least like more technical background as well. I know a lot of people in the scene, especially in the ethical hacking scene, bug bounty communities. They actually have this background as well. So it's actually very, very interesting.
So when I used to organize the conference at OWASP, my favorite part was I would go on stage and I would go, "Hey guys, great news! The OWASP band is playing tomorrow, right? Cool. Now, who can play?" And literally, what's amazing is that you always have 5, 6 people, and it's amazing. And literally, you had people that were good enough at a certain professional level that all you had to do is agree on a set list, agree how to begin, how to end, and we literally put some great concerts. We did one in Athens, we did one in Portugal, we did one in a bunch of different places, and I think Netherlands. I know Gary McGraw was rocking the fiddler. This guy's rocking the bass. It's cool, right? So. You're right. I think there's always musicians around technology in a weird way.
That's right. That's amazing. So back to the main topic. Today we'll be talking mostly about. We know that you have a great background as well on emerging technologies related with AI, LLMs, and we'll get there. But also, of course, in your CISO role. And you have been also connecting these 2, AI with security, and that's something that we are doing at Ethiack as well. So we are basically exploring the same depths of technology. So you're basically leading a decent team in cybersecurity. You're hiring people for your team in your company. So what basically your process for spotting these great talent? There's not that much talent available, at least in Portugal. It's like it's not easy for companies to be able to hire with the current paychecks, but sometimes they'll still be able to find these great talent. Is that the same situation in the UK? What's basically your process for spotting these great talent and to bring them into your team to defend the company? How do you tell this one is a great fit?
Yeah, well, I think there's several things to unpack there. Let's kind of go in bits, right? I think there is the finding the talent, there is the skills transfer, there is the bringing them on board, and how do you evaluate the talent. So I'll take them in turns, right? So by the way, we're hiring, right? It's cool. Anybody wants to join my team in UK? I have an amazing team for amazing company, amazing project. We already have a couple of roles available, and we're going to have a lot more in the next couple of months. So I think hiring is a challenge everywhere, right? Like, you talk to anybody, this is, hiring people. And to be honest, I would argue that it's one of the most important roles that a manager and a leader has to do, right? Like, that's the thing where you really have to spend the time, have to put the effort, like that's one of your main responsibilities. You don't delegate hiring to anybody else. Well, it's part of you and your team, of course, right? So, I think we're in an interesting situation at the moment in cybersecurity, because I would actually argue we have a premium in cybersecurity, which is actually artificially caused by lack of security professionals, right? And I'm putting in quotes because I think we need to redefine that term. So I do feel, especially in the UK, if you look at the salary ranges that you end up paying for somebody with a bit level of experience, I think in both security and I'll probably say data science, some DevOps, I would say probably like more cutting edge kind of technologies, there is such a demand for the talent that the prices go up, typical, market economics, right? But I feel that we miss a trick. So I always try to hire outside my industry, because I don't think, for example, we have a cybersecurity talent shortage. What we have is a skill transfer problem. What we're not good at is taking individuals and talents from other industries and bringing them into cybersecurity. Because if you look at why we hire, if you talk to somebody, when you say, what do you really care? You care about the culture fit. You care about the attitude. You care about the approach. You care about problem solving. You care about their culture fit. You care about their value systems. You care all about this stuff, right? And then at the end, you go, oh yeah, they kind of need to be good at whatever we ask them to do, right? They have to be a good DevOps engineer or a good programmer, a good this. But actually, most of that can be learned, right? In fact, in cybersecurity, we invent half our shit anyway, right? Like, anybody come from another industry, first thing they say is that, why do you guys call the same thing different names, right? Because it's variations of it, right? So I think what we need to be much better at is how to take people from other industries and bring them to cybersecurity. And when I mean bringing people from other industries, I'm saying bring doctors, bring A&Es, bring people that work in a cafe, bring the people that are cleaning up the streets, right? Like, bring good professionals. It doesn't matter, right? The thing about this is, it always doesn't matter what work you do, right? What matters is your attitude to it, right? You could be selling freaking Bowling Berlin, right? In the beach, right? You could be selling bitter cakes in the beach. But if you have a great attitude, you're going to do that job well, right? And to be honest, sometimes those jobs are really hard, right? Fucking hell, take a teacher, right? Like, a teacher who teaches 6-year-olds or 12-year-olds, like, that knows how to run chaos, right? It's like, talk about people that know how to be great professionals. So I always been a big fan of finding people outside cybersecurity and then bringing them on board, right? Basically having people that are very good professionals and then giving them the jump. Now, I've been very successful doing that. I've found some great examples. It is quite hard. And there was always something that I felt was missing, which was, it's all nice and good to try to bring them in, but there is definitely a skill shortage, or sorry, not skill shortage. There's a knowledge shortage that those individuals have. And then it's hard because you put them in a space where, the coworkers sometimes, without even doing it on purpose, they can be quite brutal, right? They go, hold on, I've been doing this for 5 years, and you come along and you don't even know what SSH is, and you don't even know what TCP is, and you haven't even done this, right? So even in a good team, there's freaking, friction, right? So what my current hypothesis, right, is that I think with the LLMs and with the ChatGPT and the next generation, it's going to be a game changer, because what it allows those new professionals who are very good at asking good questions, who are very good at learning, who are very good at processing highly complex stuff, to go deep and ask questions and have almost like a safe space to ask, what is this, right? What's going on? Blah, 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 right? And I think that what it does, it opens up dramatically the market to bring in new people that exists. So if you say, I'm struggling to hire a specific developer, a specific pen tester, specifically this, yes, it's very hard. But if you go and says, I want to hire a really good detective, I want to hire somebody that's very good at following the little nuggets, following the rabbit holes, having that instinct of knowing, oh, this is weird, that's blah, 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 which is everything we want in a pen tester, for example, right? You find that those people exist in, a lot in our world, right? So I think that mix, right? So, and there's one more I want to address, but let's just maybe talk a bit more this way. I think that mix of having, a new LLM, almost like sidekicks that you can support to people, and creating jobs that allow, individuals from other industries, especially diversity, right? Because we have a massive neurodiversity problem in our industry. I think, let's bring in those work from home moms. Let's bring in that person that was working in the middle of Portugal that, never had the opportunity to go to Lisbon, but is actually a crazy professional, right? Let's give them the opportunity that it's almost like you need electricity, you need internet, you need LLMs, right? And now if you have the three of them, well, a computer, I guess, right? You got those four, you can now be an amazing professional.
That's amazing. That's something that for sure the LLMs will provide a faster path for people to learn about a given topic, but it's the mindset that matters. I fully agree with you, because I know some friends, for example, they work on other industries, they have like some other roles, non-technology, and not in technology, but they still have this critical thinking mindset that is necessary for security, or the ability to go forward and push into a certain topic until they find the solution. And that's really amazing that you are doing that, and transferring people from other industries to cybersecurity is very, very, very.
Look, man, if you work at a restaurant, right, in peak time, you multitasking, you solving problems, you are managing expectations, you managing, freaking 50 things at the same time, right? Like that crowd knows how to deal with pressure, right? Knows how to do it. The problem is they don't have the opportunity, right? The problem is that they can't even jump. And also the interesting thing is that there's a moment where when you're senior enough, you can't go from this level of seniority to that, right? Like it kind of doesn't work too, right? Because that's the only option we have. We can say, hey, you can do this, but you're now going to have to go and take a university degree on cybersecurity. You're going to have to do this. You're going to basically have to almost like go back in time for 5 years to get to a point. And to be honest, people have done it. It's amazing. Sometimes the MBAs and so the masters in cybersecurity are full of mature, I guess maturity these days over 23, right? But of people that are a bit older, right? That are trying to do that, but that doesn't scale because, we need a way to bring those individuals back in cybersecurity. And the coolest thing is we can actually pay them, right? Because actually cybersecurity already has a premium. So for most of them, they don't even need to take a pay cut, right? We can even if they just earn what they're earning today, a bit more, they're already probably earning more. They're already great value for money in the cybersecurity space.
That makes sense. Never thought that much on this topic. So I was going to ask, like, if technical skills would matter more than culture or mindset. So I guess that for you it matters more the mindset and the culture of your teams, because the skills can be built. That's your.
Right? It's a catch-22, right? Because you have to be careful. And in security, look, there's some great managers who are not technical, amazing. There's some great places where that's great, right? I basically push all my teams to be highly technical, right? I say that everybody on my team should know how to code. These days, everybody on my team should know how to use LLMs, right? But it's the culture and the mindset before technology. It's almost like being technical in that should be a side effect of your mindset. Do you know what I mean? But you have to be careful because it's very easy for people to go, I'm very good technologist. I'm like, yeah, but technology for technology's sake, right? It's freaking pointless, right? In fact, sometimes I have these guys who geek out and they're going, dude, you so lost the plot, right? It's like, that stuff doesn't matter, right? But it's important that I would say being a technologist is crazy important, but that's a side effect of your mentality and your mindset. See what I mean?
Yeah, super interesting. Super interesting. Yeah, I think I agree. Of course, I love and I do have technical skills, advanced technical skills in hacking, in ethical hacking, and finding all these vulnerabilities and so on.
But
but
a
of
good
course,
hacker hacks everything, right? Like a good hacker is hacking every day. He's walking down the road, right? Like that's his mindset, right? The mindset is reality is different, right? I have a different, and I've done a lot of hacking, right? In the legal side of things, right? And it's cool, right? It's cool to get into a data center, to own half the freaking thing. It gets less fun when you start to think about the damage you could do, right? And also after you've done it for a while, you go, okay, but this is boring now. I want to fucking fix things now. But I think there's a mindset, right? And I also the other thing I always tell my team is they need to learn how to hack. Like there's something in your brain that changes once you do something that was not supposed to be done, right? Like once you start to realize that maybe reality is not as black and white.
It seems.
So it's a
question.
It's a mindset, exactly.
Yeah. You think you start to think on reverse, I think about reverse engineering and all that stuff. I know exactly what you mean. And when I switch from building to, to thinking in reverse, sometimes it's not very easy to switch from building to breaking things.
Building is hard, man. Breaking shit is much easier to find a way in, right? Now, to actually do it. And then it's a curse, right? Because once you know how to break, like I do a lot of development engineering these days, it's a curse because I go, fuck, this is so secure. No, I can't do that. No, I can't do that.
I know. I spent ages building features just because I wanted to make sure they were secure. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. And sometimes like something I learned on the startup on Ethiack was like sometimes you just need to ship it, and then it needs to be secure, but you need to have a good balance between shipping secure software, but not overthinking about it, like when you are hacking, basically.
Well, you have to take into account the threat actors, right? It's the threat agents, right? Like there's no point of creating crazy security features and then, and that not be reflected to the threat actors or the ability that you have to monitor what's going on, right? I think that's, like context is super important. In fact, I find that my job is to allow the business to take risk. It's almost the other way around. It's not about not taking risk. It's about I need to get the business I work with to take as much risk as they are comfortable with, right? That is part of their business model. So it's very interesting because if you force a company to take unnecessary risks, or if you allow a company to take unnecessary risks, it's very dangerous, right? Because they can basically literally be blowing themselves up without even realizing, right? Like some of the vulnerabilities that we not know. But on the other hand, if you force companies not to take risk because you put some policies or checks or this, or like I said, you overwork on features where you make them too secure for what they need to be, right? Then you actually are slowing down the company. So you actually are causing the company more damage than whatever the exploitation of that vulnerability would have caused. So, we in security don't talk sometimes a lot about this, that we sometimes are a massive risk for the business. And we actually are a massive vulnerability ourselves because we make the business slower in areas where they shouldn't, right? And if you go back, for example, to the whole bug bounties and pen testing and stuff like that, the biggest problem has always been that how do you connect that with context? And that's why the AI stuff, I think, or the Gen AI, I think is so critical because for the first time, I can see how we can really scale that. Because from the black box, you always had an advantage, which is like you can say, well, I just did it, right? It doesn't matter if you think or not it's possible. I literally just did X. But that X, even then, was not in context. Like, doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter that you have, SQL injection in that box. Doesn't matter that you have cross-site scripting. Doesn't matter that you can dump the source code. Doesn't matter that you can do this. Doesn't matter that you can pivot and do remote code execution. Well, sometimes it doesn't, right? Sometimes you are in an environment that is like, in fact, you're in an environment that, hey, cool, at least it's almost like a honeypot, right? In a weird way for our business. But on the other places, it's like, shit, you can't do that, right? Like that would be crazy, right? If you could do even half of that in that environment. So we, from a security point of view, need to be able to be better at connecting that this is possible to here are the threat actors, to here's the business organization. And actually, more importantly, which is something that you guys usually don't care about, and you should, is who the hell is going to fix this? And more importantly, who's going to pay for it? right? Because you have to remember that everything in a business costs money, right? You want to do something, somebody's time is going to have to do it. That's money. So fixing things can be quite expensive. So knowing who can fix it, that's almost hacking the organization itself, right? It's like, how do you get the organization to actually do what it needs to do in a way that doesn't freak out or cost too much or it's like fights itself?
Yeah, it's all about finding the balance, between security, usability, and functionality.
Absolutely.
It's all. It can be simplified to these most of the times. I cannot imagine your life as a CISO. I never had that experience, but I can imagine that it's a job about like evaluating risk, of course, and implementing the best practices.
It's just hacking at a different level, right?
At a different level. Yeah.
That's how I look at it. Like you're trying to hack the organization to do the right thing for her, right? And that's why it's all about understanding the direction. Like, so for example, Holland Barrett, it's all about trust and making sure that we protect the data from our customers. Glasswall is all about, being highly efficient in processing files. From a security point of view, you have to find what the company wants, where they're going to go, and then how to hack the HR system, i.e. how to get shit done, right? How to hack the finance system, how to making relationships, working the system, being good professionals. I view that as hacking, right? It's a problem, right? You break the things apart, you find the things, you find the little loopholes, and then you get stuff done, right? It's just different layers, right? It's just different abstraction layers, right?
Exactly. You can.
By the way, just for reference, when I'm saying you hack the HR system, I'm not literally saying you hack the HR system. I'm saying you kind of find ways around the processes, right? But you bring them on board, right? You bring them on board, and it's all good. And every now and then you get in trouble. In fact, I tell my team they don't get in trouble enough, right? Because I underwrite their stuff. They just don't push hard enough.
Yeah, that can be the case sometimes. Okay, so in your team, let's get back to the topic. This was super interesting. If we talk about these new technologies, and I've seen what you're doing on the sidelines with Tina bot in the cyber boardroom, which is, you can explain better, of course, but it's a cybersecurity advisor powered by ChatGPT. So do you want to talk a bit about it? What you see, how you see the future of this product? And how do you see also that this can be applied maybe to your team to make it more productive as well, to other teams, to executives, for example? What's your vision about this project?
Yeah, so I'm always a big fan that if you try to learn something, you do it around the use case, right? Because or else you go on tangents, you do a lot of hypotheticals. So the cyberboard room, it's a really cool example, right? It's about saying, look, I have a problem today. I guess every CISO I know have a problem, which is how do we communicate with the boards, right? How do we explain what we do? Because you kind of need the board, right? Like, in fact, one of my CISO 100%. Jobs, I met the board member. He says, hey, hi, you here because of me. I was like, thank you for that. But because he said he was a board member of this company, and he basically, when he arrived, he going, where's your security team? Where's your CISO, right? And they're like, oh, is that dude over there? That's not even the CISO. That's the guy who does security, right? And they was like, no, you guys need a fucking decent security team, right? So that's a good board member, right? But what you now have is this sort of combination of the board members who now start to have security responsibilities and cybersecurity responsibilities, don't really understand, and to be honest, like, why would they, right? It's not their domain, but it's really important, right? And they don't have access to good knowledge bases. And you have all these CISOs that wants to communicate, but they feel that the right messages or the right questions are not being asking upwards. So it's almost like, I love when I get questions from my board members, because it's a moment for us to shine, right? Because we get to show the stuff that we do, and the stuff that we don't do, we send that and the bill, right? Say, hey, we don't do this. If you want us to do this, we can sponsor a bit more, right? So I think there's a gap there, right? So the more I start using the LLMs and the more I start really leveraging it, I realize that the power of ChatGPT and the power of it is the ability to express context, is the ability to almost have a dialogue in a way that you have this almost intermediate representation of what you're talking about, where the output is dynamically generated. And that's an insane paradigm, because what it allows you to do is allows you to suddenly spend time on context. I want to do this. I want to do that. What about this? What about that? And then allows you to refactor things. So one of the blind spots I think today exists on the whole LLM, and we're not talking about Terminator and all that stuff, which by the way needs to be regulated, right? Because or else it's like nuclear weapons, right? There needs to be a level of regulation here, right? That it needs to happen at a certain amount of this. But I would say for everything else, there's sometimes too much focus on the full end-to-end, which is like, it's like, oh, I asked you to do this and the result was shit. Well, actually, humans hallucinate too, right? Like, you shouldn't, it's not like these things are, give you 100% solutions. But what they do is in the hands of a professional, they augment your capabilities. And fundamentally what they allow you to do is to become almost an expert level in all these different domains that in the past you couldn't be. And I think that's the sweet spot. So it's almost about having lots and lots of mini bots that are very good at one thing, so you can build a virtual team. Imagine like here, you have this podcast, the amount of resources and money that you can dedicate to the podcast are going to be X, right? But really, you needed more editors, more content persons. You needed some developers. You needed QA. You needed all this stuff that you would love to do, but you just can't afford to hire. What you now can do is you can spend your time creating the briefs and managing almost all these mini coworkers. And then if there's an area that you need more expertise, hire the human, and then that person helps to accelerate that. So I feel that the bot world that we're going into is one where it's about highly specialized skills that you basically have, or that you've trained, right, to act in a certain way. It could fundamentally be ChatGPT behind it, but it's almost these agents, these personas that does that. So the cyber boardroom is my experiment with that. It's basically trying to say, hey, if you're a board member, or if you want to brief a board member, how would you do it? And what's the language? What's the in a way, how can you get value from those interactions, and how can that work? And I think it solves tons of problems that we always have. So let's say that workflow, right? Somebody's using, and we call them Athena and Minerva and Odin, because you kind of need to personalize these things, right? So Athena is like the cyber boardroom bot. So you can imagine a board member going, hey, what questions should ask my CISO? Then what's cool about it is Athena can go to the CISO and say, hey, can you answer this, right? And then we'll answer that. We should answer with a lot of detail. And then Athena can take that and we can translate that to this board member. But more importantly, if this board member has technical expertise, it translates for somebody with technical expertise. If this board member has finance expertise, it translates with somebody with finance expertise. If this is an HR specialist, and this is the bit that never scaled in the past, like our risks. We talked about translating risks to the board. Well, that's bollocks, because there isn't one board. There is 5 or 7 individuals, and each have different views, expectations, and experiences. So even a risk or a review or an answer has to be translated into each one's. And each one has different backgrounds. Each one's like Myers-Briggs. They have different styles. They have different things. They have different expectations. So the beauty of the bot is you can take all of that into account and have these highly now specialized answers that are customized to the individual. And you apply this to everywhere in the company. A vulnerability, how do you take a vulnerability all the way to the stakeholders, developers, board members? You have to apply this. So you don't have one description of a vulnerability, right? What you have is variations upon variations of that vulnerability based on, the context of that person, right? So then what you end up having is a situation where what you want is to be very factual correct. You want a situation where the data starts to be really, really, really good, and the graph of the data is very solid. And then you allow the LLMs, or the LLMs of the LLMs of the LLMs, because there's nothing wrong with having one bot talking to another bot to feed the other bot, and then the final bot verifies it, and the other one creates this. That tree of bots that allow you the message to arrive at the right individual with the right context, in the right medium, right, in the right way. Where in the past was insane to try to create this. This would be like millions of pounds of research just to do like a tenth of what I just described.
For sure, it's a new world. I absolutely agree, and it's awesome that you are building this product, this MVP. it's very, very interesting. Are you using this internally already, or is it something that you're building on your own?
No. So my world is completely intersect, right? So at Glasswell, we're really going a lot on AI, but this is important to also to basically think like for example, it doesn't mean that you're going to get an AI talking to customers, right? That tends to be the last step. But the productivity gains that you can do internally are insane. But this is a tool that needs to be learned, right? So, I'm now pushing heavily my team. We already have a couple of use cases, and we're going to have a lot more. Holland Barrett already has done a lot of stuff on it, and is going to do a lot more. And I'm going to stop here, else I get caught like my chief data scientist. Then people talk about. I was talking about the Holland Barrett, AI strategy. So somebody else is going to talk about it. I was going to say that there's a lot of activity going internally, but it's about that. It's about how do you leverage this, right? It's about embracing it as a way to make it better. Specifically in cybersecurity, the areas that I'm really interested that we're already looking at is the risk part, how to translate risks, how to create risks, how to map that out. Is a little bit some of the automation parts. How do you create some of the workflows? How do you map that stuff across? I'm very interested in the whole vulnerability management. Again, we're starting to look at it. Some of the vendors are already touching a little bit on it, so you kind of have that, and but also, of course, in intrusion detection, right? In our sort of incident response,
generating new signatures and so on.
Exactly, right. That's really cool. And I also quite like the idea of having like at least adversarial, right? A bit more AI-driven sort of attackers, right? That are now probing the system.
That's what we do, by the way. If you want to try it, just let us know.
I think it's really cool, right? I think that's definitely a way forward, right? And and I think that world is ripe for change, because the whole bug bounty, the whole pen testing stuff has been stale for like decades.
Yeah, it's new techniques coming up every day, new techniques, and new vulnerabilities every day, of course. But I think that this is leading to a different way we approach, or we should approach, both defensive and offensive security side of things. Yeah. I'd like to ask you as well, as a CISO, do you see a clear rise of automation-based attack vectors as well, eventually powered by these tools?
Yeah, they are. Well, I'll say we see increased automation. We haven't seen a lot of stuff that I would say is clearly AI-driven, but I think that's a matter of time, right? I think that's coming. In fact, the user base kind of problems are really, I think that's going to be a massive issue, because the ability of creating deep fakes, the ability of creating really clever, realistic impersonation stuff, that's going to force a rethinking of, even at a human level, of how do I authenticate something? How do I know that the other person is that person, right? I think we can help a lot in cybersecurity. I think we can start to provide a level of, hey, we don't think this is a real thing. They might look like it. But also, you have to remember, these things are never black and white, right? Like, when somebody, for example, the moment that somebody gets duped by a deep fake is the moment that person will change, right? So there's a lot, people will evolve with this, right? But I do think that especially on the phishing, on that kind of first level of attacks, it's going to go up a level very, very fast. Although one of the things that cybersecurity sometimes we don't mention is that some people make fun on the fact that the scam letters are badly written, right? And they have spelling mistakes and do all that stuff, right? What they sometimes don't think about is there's a reason why they do that, right? And there's a direct correlation between the people that don't spot spelling mistakes and the people that most likely will fall for the scam. Because you have to remember that from a criminal point of view, you don't want a lot of responses, right? You only want response from people that might fall for your scam, right? Because if everybody replied to you, actually it would be a nightmare, right? Because it's like you have a big cost. So there's an interesting trick here, right? And I think the AIs might find that, right? Might find that people say, oh, suddenly you have really, really clever, well-written emails. Maybe no, you just have better variations of the badly written emails that give you the signal.
They can just put in the prompts, like, just do all these mistakes on purpose.
Right?
And
but here's the thing, right? I have a massive problem when we complain about the users, right? And we say, it's almost there's this underlying thing that the users are the problem, right? If only they didn't click on things, if only they didn't do that. That is the biggest scam that we as an industry done to the outside world. It's not a freaking user's responsibility, right? To make sure that they're protecting your entire organization, right? Their job is to have a bit of common sense, right? It's our job to make sure that if they install the wrong thing, if they click on the wrong thing, we pick it up. Because at the end of the day, right, there's a big difference between you spending all your day in Outlook and here and there. So suddenly, you know, your machine is now connecting internally and doing stuff and sending half your data to the outside world. Come on, that's not a normal user, right? Unless he's malicious, and then we want to know about it anyway. So what I think this is going to do is I think this is going to dispel the myth that the users are the problem, because they're going to be hacked and tricked even more, because again, it's a trick, right? And we are, right? Remember, the cybersecurity professionals are as bad as everybody else, right? Statistically, right? It's like we fell for the phishing scams as much as everybody else, right? When they're well done, right? So I think this is going to really force the conversation to move. We need to pick patterns of what good looks like. So when something bad happens, we figure it out, we isolate it, we deal with it, and it's not a drama, right? So, which is why we need to apply freaking LLMs and machine learning to our backend and secure defenses, right? And again, like part of the pen testing job is to go how deep you can, right? Like in a way, if you have a company doing a lot of hacking and the only thing they can do is get a couple of people to run some stuff, that's a great result. If they can go from there and have domain admin and have AWS or, you know, Google Cloud or Azure keys, well, then that's the problem. You know? But that doesn't happen in step one, right? It's not like you go, hey, dude, can you just send me your root AWS keys by email, right? And the guy goes, yeah, okay, you know, right? It's not like that.
Yeah. Okay, Dinis, I wanted to ask you still about the automation-based attacks. So let's say that attackers start using LLMs to generate code to exploit vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. It's kind of already happening in the sense of there's a new vulnerability coming out. I mean, like critical CV or something like that. And after 15 minutes or half an hour, we start seeing attacks. It could not be targeted to our companies, but it's happening, right?
Yeah.
What do you think it's the best strategy to prevent these vectors? You think you need to be faster in terms of offensive security? You need to be faster in terms of defensive security. You need to wake up in the middle of the night and have this alert and go and fix it? Or you think it's like a combination of both, or just automation so we can sleep properly?
Well, yeah, I think there's a mix of that, right? So the first interesting thing, and I saw this guy said recently, and I really agree with it, it's like the weaponization of vulnerabilities is nothing new, right? Like, you know, again, I'm from the generation that people used to get arrested at DEF CON, right? And I'm from the generation that used to say you patch at Metasploit speed, which is people ignore the freaking vulnerability. The moment that Metasploit will create, you know, the exploit, everybody will patch straight away, right? Because because and also the attacks will happen at Metasploit speed, right? Because that will be different now. So I think the weaponization of a vulnerability always happened, right? And it's been around for already at least 5 to 10 years at a good level, right? I think you might have a bit more automation, a bit more, but that's not the gap today, right? It's the gap of exploitation. It's not there, although it will happen. Right? There'll be a couple of cases where somebody will wire that thing together, right? Very fast. I think what we need to be better at is patching, right? Is isolating. And again, in the past, the problem was always context. Where, for example, like we need to be much better at saying this CV just happened. What do we need to patch for it, and how do we prepare for it, and how do we know what to do? So even if we don't patch it now, what do we know what is required to patch it? Because see, the thing that the offensive guys don't care about or don't think about is that patching is very dangerous. In fact, you can cause more damage in an organization by patching than by not patching.
Of course, you can, right? You can damage availability. You can stop a system sometimes.
Yeah, you can, and systems sometimes are incompatible, and the vendors milk that cow left, right, and center, right? Because they'll go, oh, you need an upgrade for this, an upgrade for that.
Of course.
Right? So basically, it's not as three-dimensional, not as simple. But I feel that, again, I can now see how we are able to create visualizations and plans for, like, take for example, like if I said to my team, hey guys, this is 0 day, right? I want a full mapping of this vulnerability. I want to know exactly where we have this in our estate, which things use it, what's the attack vectors into it. I want a threat model for every one of them. I want data flow diagrams. I want business analysis. I want a brief for I find all the stakeholders. I want a brief for every single stakeholder. I want a project plan, right? I want a change control request for all of them. I want to basically map all this out, and I want this, and I want all this costed. Which, by the way, is what needs to happen, right? In a company, right? Okay, if you're a small company, you do that little, but as long as there's a certain size.
Of course.
Now, all of this, can you imagine? Like, if I went to my team and said that, they would fucking shoot me, right? Because it would take them, literally 5 days to pull it off, right?
Yeah.
Now, okay, maybe some companies are better or less, etc., but it would still be a huge amount of work, and it would be a one-off work. Now you go, oh, cool, yeah, you did that for that one. I got another 20 coming along, right? So the power of an LLM is that each of those components can now have the help of an LLM. So suddenly you can have an LLM that maps the vulnerability in the technical details. You can have another one that consumes raw, GitLab artifact materials. You have another one that connects the dots, another one that goes to the org chart, another one that does this, another one that does. And of course, you need to instrument them. You need to connect the dots. You need to be there. But suddenly it's a lot more realistic to do these things. And if I can give you guys at Ethiack a recommendation, get into that world, right? Like, I used to joke with the pen testers and the bug bounty guys. I said, if you could sell me an org chart of my organization that is actually representative of the reality, that's worth more money than whatever you're charging me. Right? If you can actually tell me who the hell today works where and who's responsible for what and who hasn't moved and who can actually fix this vulnerability that you discovered, that is worth more money than whatever we paid for that vulnerability.
So basically, you're saying that we need to focus on patching, on the defensive security side of things, and on the offensive security side of things, we need to identify where those vulnerabilities are faster, because that's the core of the issue.
It needs to be better, right? Like if you think about it, the power of a pen tester, right? The power of a bug bounty is that it tells you where you are in the market, right? So the way I look at it is there's the state actors, which are really dangerous, but they're very focused. There is the ideology attackers who tend to go after specific things, and there's the criminal gangs and the criminal individuals, and then there's the script kidders who are doing for fun or by accident, right? The power of a good pen testing or bug bounty program allows you to basically say, I have nothing that a script kidder will find. I have nothing that a commercial criminal organization with this amount of resources, which I've tracked to my threat actors, are currently finding. So part of your job is to exploit the hell out of it until they run out of things to exploit, right? And I want to challenge my incident response team to say they want to make your life miserable, because if your life is miserable, right, means the attacker life is miserable. So there's a balance here where you need the offensive security, because that's your probing the system. That's me having assurance that whatever gaps we have are being discovered and we know about them, so we can plan for it. So the unknown unknowns is what really worries me. To know that there's a massive vulnerability here, but we are aware of, and we can then say, okay, but if somebody exploited that, can we find out? And if we can, then that's not as problematic as this lower level vulnerability that we have no visibility if you get exploited. Do you know what I mean? So again, that's that context that is so critical.
Both sides are very, very important. I'm sure, because it's how it works. We go deep into the root cause and we find vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities can be prioritized. They can be critical. They cannot be critical. And of course, I think that LLMs are very good in terms of generate a rule for my firewall to block this pattern. Perfect, right? If we think about a decent patching, a reliable patching level, it's much more difficult to get an LLM to be able to write the patch, because sometimes it's binary. It's from a third party, like you were saying, like the third party won't be fixing that soon, right? But we can maybe be faster at applying these partial fixing, right?
Yeah, but it's also everything around it, right? Like, think about it. Like, you don't need LLMs to solve everything, right? What we need to do is to raise the bar. So to have LLMs that can give you simulations, run multiple paths, do analysis, verify things, that's what they're really good at, right? So yeah, some of them might be able to go, oh, here's a firewall rule. But even having a system where you say, okay, I've now figured out the firewall rule. Can you now figure out the best way to deploy it? Can you figure out all this? Change control along the way. It just means that, like, for example, like firewall rules is a good example. Like, when was the last time you saw a firewall freaking, rule set that makes any sense and doesn't have full of holes? The problem is there's no human that can understand that. And the tools are, I'm not going to use a word for it, but they don't have enough visibility, right? They don't get it. So we now are going to a world where we can really start to zoom in and we can describe the intent. Right? I could say, I don't want this to occur. I don't want any ports outside of this to be open. I want to make sure that every time that this occurred, that is installed and that is installed and this is happening and that is happening. In the past, that was impossible. And by the way, we're hiring a pen tester, right? I actually made sure the title had hacker, right? This is why I like Holland Barrett. They do have a good sense of humor for this stuff. Like, it kind of took a while we had to explain to them, but it was cool, right? So we actually are hiring a pen tester / hacker, right? And the job is to freaking hack everything, but also to interact with servers like yours, right? To interact with the bug bounty crowd, interact with with that thing, But I'm a big believer in offensive, right? Like I always like to say, if you can't break it, right, the vulnerability doesn't exist. So it's either BSing, it's too complicated, doesn't exist. If you can't exploit it, there's something wrong, right? Are you not good enough, right?
I'm a huge offensive security lover. I acknowledge defensive security for sure, but the beauty of exploiting a vulnerability, it's just like something out of this world. And like it's all about hacking your company before a real attacker. That's like you prevent the situation that will happen hypothetically in the future, in the present, right? You close that window. But you don't know for sure if it's going to be exploited in the future.
But actually, here's another thing that I feel you guys missed a trick on, is that, and I challenge my team. In fact, one trick I do is I raise P3s as P1s strategically. So there's a lot of times where we'll have a P3, P5, not bad, P3, medium high, P1, P0, critical, right? I raise P3s as P1s because what I would do is I would say, for example, if a customer tells us they had a security problem or their account were hacked or whatever, for me, that's a P1. Now, you could argue that it's a P3 because the first question is, how much money have we lost? How important is the customer? All that stuff. But the reason for me is a P1 is because the customer told us. So if you think about it, how many things failed, at that moment in time? So one of the things that you guys missed the trick when you do pen testing and hacking is that when you do anything that is not discovered by the existing defenses, that's a vulnerability, right? So I used to have a party trick when I do my pen testing reports, especially when I have juicy stuff, right? It doesn't work when you don't have juicy stuff. When I had juicy stuff, I used to say, I have an extra finding in here that I'm going to remove if you can tell me what's on this report. Because if you cannot tell me what I'm about to tell you, you have bigger problems, right? Because
I call that a bypass, not a vulnerability. I
get what you're saying, but dude, it's a massive. I'm telling you, look, I'm the CISO, right? I'm telling you, it's a vulnerability. You know why? Because it's a gap. Like, why should you? This is like you're saying you should be able to go to a bank, play around with it, open all the doors, reverse, do all sorts of crazy shit in a bank, come with a fucking bulldozer, knock at the doors, and people go, yeah, that's okay. It's like, no, man. Like, literally, I know what my real customers are doing. None of them are doing that. So why should you be allowed to do that? So the way I look at it is that...
It depends on the impact, right? It depends. There are bypasses that have impact, right? Or...
No, it doesn't matter, man. Like, probe it. Look,
the impact, basically.
Look, think about it. Everything you do to the website that a real customer doesn't do is a vulnerability. We should detect it. For example, even your browser, right?
You should detect that behavior, but I don't agree that's a vulnerability.
It is vulnerability.
Not necessarily.
No. The vulnerability is the fact that we didn't pick it up. That's the vulnerability. Like, for example, if you send 1,000 requests, 500 requests to a particular endpoint, we should not allow it to happen. The vulnerability is the fact that we allow that to happen. The vulnerability is the fact that why do we wait for you to have a real impacted exploit before we call it a vulnerability, right? Because, and this is the cool thing, as a defender, I don't need you, I don't need a mode where I have to defend against everything you do. I just need you to make a little mistake. And a little mistake is when you make a request that nobody else does. And unless you have a 0-day surgical, in fact, unless you discover that vulnerability in somebody else and come and do something that we never even heard about before, right? There's always a signal. You're always going to browse. It's like in the movies, right? When they go back to the tapes and see like the Ocean 11, walking around and checking out. It's the same thing. Why do we wait, for you to rob the bank to realize that, people who are looking around for security cameras, maybe they're not your typical customers, right?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I just have a offensive security mindset, in the sense of, if there's a bypass for a certain control, let's say that I can send 1,000 requests, 1 million requests to a server. For you, as a CISO, that's a vulnerability. That's very interesting, because for me, if the system is like, if the availability is not compromised or the confidentiality or anything, that's not a vulnerability for me as an attacker. You know what you're saying?
I know, but you are slowing down my.
You're consuming resources.
You're consuming resources, and the most part of here is that we are sending you the message that we're not paying attention, right? Like you have a WAF, but the WAF should be, in a way, the WAF should only allow valid traffic. Which, of course, is the reason that they don't do it, is because nobody freaking knows what valid traffic is, right? And they don't spend the time to map it out and build a system around it. Again, AI will help that. The LLMs will allow me to say, hey, can you look at all the logs, right? And now tell me all the paths that our customers have asked for the last
100%.
month. Yeah. Anything outside of it, fucking block it, right? But you see, the power of that is that you go into a known good state. And this is what I've learned in Glasswall that was so cool, is the idea that when you go to a known good state, it's a very different paradigm, right? So in a way, your job is to find those blind spots. Your job is to find how can you go bypass the existing defenses, which are about detecting normal users. And what I'm saying is that the trick I'm saying you're missing is because those are valid findings. If you can send 10,000 requests to a server, that should be one of your top findings, because that means their WAF or whatever they're using in that place is not properly tuned.
It's not reliable. Yeah, I understand perfectly what you're saying. But in terms of bug bounties, for example, most organizations won't be paying for those, for example. Also the informatives most of the times.
By the way, I'll pay for that. And we have a bug bounty program.
Okay, invite me, please.
Yeah, you can go. Look,
is it public or is it private?
Yeah. You can go to vulnerability. Yeah. You can submit it. I don't think we've done the full public one, but there's a bug bounty.
There's a private
program.
All right.
Yeah. No, but you can go to, I think it's we got the security TXT, and if you go
okay,
vulnerability reporting,
I'll look it up.
Yeah, it's a valid finding, man. Like I think it's a level of maturity. In fact, there's an amazing OS project that dealt with that. I think it was proactive security control or something like that, that had some really cool stuff about it. And just to wrap on this, like a good application should morph and modify its behavior based on what's happening. So for example, why should, let's say you're attacking the application, right? Why should the website behave the same way to you than to our best customers, right? Like if I now know or believe that you are potentially malicious, why should you have access to the same things that everybody else has access to? If I have these customers that now I know, like my super lovely customers who are buying a lot of stuff, they should have a much better experience than you, right? And that's
OS proactive controls. Very interesting. Yeah, I'm looking it up. Yeah,
it's really cool project, right? And but I remember in the past, the challenge I always had with a lot of the OS projects and the stuff I did in the past and others is I could never see how we could scale. It's like, we want a testing guides, or we want a guidance guide or ASVF. Great, here's 500 page. I cannot fucking give 500 pages for the developer team, right? But on the other hand, you go, oh, here's a 2-pager for the developer teams. And they go on and they look at it and go, yeah, but that's pretty obvious, right? Like, what do I do with this, right? So the problem was always, how do you create highly customized, small chunks of content that are in context for the audience? So basically, how do you go from 500 pages of ASVS, OS maturity model, proactive guide, and distill that to the two-pager thing that is relevant to that person,
things that matter,
etc. Yeah. So now that's why wrapping all thing around, I think that's why the LLMs are so critical, because they allow us to now explain what we want in context.
Interesting. I also wanted to ask you, we talked a bit about the future, but as a CISO and as a hacker, what trends and developments in AI do you anticipate in the next, let's say, 5 years? How do you see the internet in the next 5 years and security world? And what will be the impact on chief information security officers?
Well, I think the internet is going to become very bot driven. I think the idea that you go to a website and try to figure out what you want is going to look so, it's going to be like black, like my kids say, it's like from the black and white days, right? Like, I think more and more you go to a website and you have a conversation. I'm looking for this. I want that. What about this? Or here's who I am, etc. So I think that will change reasonably fast. I feel from a security defending point of view, I think it's very exciting, right? I think we can have a much bigger impact in the business, and I think we can defend much better than we could at the moment. I always used to say that, well, I still say that security deserves a seat at the table, not because of security, but because of the visibility and the sort of reach we have. What I mean by that is that we are the only entity in the whole organization that has access to all the data, has access to every single exec, can actually connect the dots in ways that nobody else can. Well, we need that because when there's an incident, we need to be able to follow those rabbit holes, right? But we have an ability to have insights to the business, and we have the ability to allow the business to take certain areas of directions that they want to go. That is massive. In the way that technology today is the enabler, I think security, and especially Holland Barrett, I talk a lot about trust, about the risk, how we maintain that. I think it's very exciting from a security defense point of view. And yeah, I know the attackers are going to get more sophisticated, which is the way they had. But I think that we have an ability to fix a lot of fundamental problems that our industry has or had, for a while, that suddenly we can glue things together in a much more effective way. And the good news is for the companies who play that and ride that wave, I know there's going to be companies that are going to eat another industry lunch, not even because they want to, right? It's just because they got there and they were so good. Let's say, for example, like if you guys become really good at creating org charts, you're going to be hired just by a company who does org charts, right? Because, like it's better than whatever somebody else has, right? So I think there's a lot of vendors. The best description I heard is that most security vendors today should be super excited and super freaked out, because they should be excited. There's a lot of great potential, but they should be freaked out because their industry and their sector might not exist in 2 years from now, because they're going to be, and the worst part is they're going to be eaten by another company or another industry that is not even trying to compete with them. Like for example, the static analysis crowds, if they're not careful, the QA crowd will eat their lunch, like just for breakfast, right? Because security is just going to be something that a good QA or a good analysis from a QA, from a testing point of view, is just going to do everything and more that the current static analysis tool do. But all the other way around, right? You can have a great static analysis tool that suddenly, eats half of the QA market because they become better at writing unit tests programmatically, become better at visualization, become better at threat modeling, become better architectural diagrams. So I think it's very exciting. I think there's a lot of great innovation playing around. It's definitely going to be a case of the companies that innovate and innovate effectively, they're going to have a massive sort of competitive advantage.
I've had that feeling with Q&A, actually. It's very interesting that you are mentioning that, because a friend of mine was doing some Q&A testing to our product, and me, I'm not a Q&A person, but it seemed like that they were doing already some security static analysis, because they are verifying the inputs, right? And it's one of the OWASP proactive controls that you were mentioning, validate the user inputs. And it's very interesting that you see that it will merge. Okay, but let's forget that you are a CISO. Like as a citizen, as a human, how do you see the future of the internet? More controlled, more free as it should, more chaotic in the sense of, you know, us not being able to tell what's real anymore? How do you see the internet in 5 years?
It is weird because there's definitely chunks of our, I'll say, political and business world that they are bent on creating crazy reality. It's almost like they don't need an LLM to come up with crazy shit, right? Like they're already, you know.
That's right.
And I live in the UK, so we had a good experience of that quite recently. But I think that's going to be, in a weird way, that's probably going to bring the whole need to have verifiable thing. I think verifiable information is going to be, in fact, it should be a good business, because I think we have we went through a period where facts became almost like really weird, right? Like it's almost like, you know, alternative facts, right? It's like as long as you say something loud enough and you keep repeating it, it becomes a fact, right? It's crazy, right? You almost need a foundation of society, right, to build on. I think it's one of those where it depends a little bit on some key players, right? I think it depends a little bit on what happens. I'm an optimist. I think we can come out of this much better, but you know, there's definitely a lot of interest that, you know, don't want. It's almost like, so the analogy here is that the reason why the LLMs are growing so fast is because the last revolutions that we can say in technology, the internet, even the mobile, even the cloud, they were driven against the big players. So if you look at the big players or the big companies in the world, none of them understood the internet. None of them understood mobile. None of them understood the cloud. So they fought about it. They fight it. They didn't embrace it. They didn't invest on it. So it's almost like, in a way, they created space for the new ones to take over, right? Which they did. What happens with the LLMs is that the biggest players in the world, the Microsofts, the Googles, the, you know, Morgan Stanley, right? You know, fucking, you know, McKinsey, you know, big pharmaceutical, like big players, right? Big companies, right? Even governments, they realize the power of the LLMs, and they realize that is a fundamental threat to their business. So this is like Blockbuster realizing, guys, broadband is going to kill our business. Let's double down on broadband and that content, right? Instead of, you know, being at the movies, right, and dying. But I think that drives a crazy amount of innovation in, you know, in the internet and in the LLMs. And I think, you know, you probably have a similar thing now happening with, you know, the general public, because I think there's a lot of interests, you know, not in a good way, in some cases, to create a lot of crazy content. And I think those guys, in a way, they're going to help us, because they're going to create so much shit that is going to actually force, I would say, a fact-driven society to emerge. So that's my hope, right? My hope is that, although it's going to be a bit messy, the only solution for this is to be fact-driven, right? Because think about it, like if anybody can create something with your face, with your voice, with your text, etc., then there has to be a way for you to verify this. Like,
verify this. Yeah.
It might even be that blockchain finds a great use case, right? Because talk about an industry keeps trying to find a use case.
Have you seen the World App Orb verification thing with the World Coin, or not really?
Yeah, a bit. And you know, those are experiments. I'm a big, like, I'm all for free markets. You know, I guess I'm part of a capitalist world, but I'm in the middle, right? Because I think some things are probably very socialist, some things are very capitalist. I have to say, I don't think for-profit organizations are good guardians for some of these things.
Yeah,
I'm a big believer that
we need to have a balance.
Exactly, privacy, trust. That's a commons in the right term. That it belongs to the community, right? So I way more trust, you know, foundations, communities, things that have open governance than, you know, these for-profit companies, which are great sometimes to take it to a certain level, but there's a moment where shareholder pressure doesn't matter how good you start, right? Every single example that we had, if there's shareholder pressure, eventually it would go south on the values, right? So I think the stakes are a bit higher on this.
Yeah, I'm very aligned with you regarding this topic. All right, so to before we bounce, real quick, I have some final questions here. If I try to answer like really quick before we bounce. So, what's one cybersecurity practice you never skip on? something that you do.
MFA.
MFA.
Like,
so
you people, they want all of this. Just multi-factor authentication. If I can do that, and you can paste your password on the internet.
Okay, so you always have your YubiKey, I assume, with you, and then you forget it at home.
Right?
And yeah, of course.
What it is, but yeah, if you only use passwords for your systems, it's kind of a problem.
Yeah. All right. And another question would be, what advice would you give to new professionals in cybersecurity?
Create a presentation. In fact, that's great, because the only topic I want to just make sure we do is that I don't like CVs. I can't read CVs. I hate CVs. I think they're a shit way to present somebody. I like a presentation. So for two things the newcomers should do is A, have a great way to present themselves, because they're competing against others. So a presentation that talks about who they are, their values, their history, all that stuff. And the other one is contribute to open source projects, right? Because that shows motivation. And first of all, if you're a hacker, like, your score, your bug bounty score should be, at the end of the day, you can't say you're a hacker these days without, having some kind of visibility on finding shit, right? Or else you're not finding much, right? So
same. I would also recommend CTFs as well.
Yeah,
CTFs.
exactly, right? But that's part of it, right? So open source, because you'll be surprised. Like most open source projects are not that big, and actually, if you tell me, oh, I've contributed to these projects, that already tells me so much about you. And OWASP. Look, I ran the Open Security Summit. Fucking, we could do a lot of help there, right? And you meet crazy people, right? So yeah. Be involved.
Those are great opportunities.
Have a presentation about you that really makes you stand out.
Okay, and one final question before we bounce. What was the coolest moment that you had in information security?
Oh, it's hacking, man. Like, dude, when you do the happy dance, right? Like, there's definitely a moment where you kind of there. And I also learned that sometimes it's okay to delay report. I became good at going, guys, I'm not ready. So I would delay. So because what I started doing, I did this thing called the O2 platform, where I would build tools to hack. And initially I thought it was weird, because every project I would develop, and then I build a toolkit to do it. Yeah, no, but that moment where you kind of have an instinct, you're going around, and then you just compromise and you take over the whole system. I know it's a little bit kind of on a borderline, not evil, but it's like there's a cool moment that when you hack a system, and you take it over and you have access to the whole thing. And then you call them and say, if we did this, what will happen? And they'll go, it's not possible. But, just humor me. If you could do this, they go, it's not possible. And they go, okay, dude, I just did that, right? So what happens now? Right now, that is cool, man.
It's the dopamine rush.
I probably should be smiling so much, but it's definitely cool when you find, and even these days, every now and then we have a vendor that doesn't play ball, and I go into my hacking rules and going, okay, guys, give me a couple of days. And go, okay, see that vulnerability? That's why we need to talk. So nothing like an exploit to open up conversation.
Of course. Yeah, I agree. But let's not forget, for you guys that are seeing this episode, this webinar, with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, yeah. So never cross the line.
Never forget that.
That's the thing. Never, ever, ever cross the line of ethical. Always be in a place where you always have the and to be honest, that always gets you out of jail, right? Sometimes literally, right? But it always be on the ethical side of things, right? And these days, I would argue that have permission, right? Like I'm from generation that you would tell a company you have a massive vulnerability, here's your domain admin, and they'll threaten to sue you, right? It's like, dude, seriously, right? So we've evolved past that. So I would say these days I go to Bugcrowd or HackerOne, whatever. There's a list of companies there that says, please hack me. Oh look, hack Holland Barrett, right? We'll pay you, right? So
and they pay well. So it's an amazing opportunity, and it's certainly changing the world.
I wish I could send some invoices retroactively, right? I go, hey, I did find this massive vulnerability. Can you pay for it? So but look, hack away. Always do it. Look, get paid, right? Like at the end of the day, right? Unless you are a criminal, then it's a different story. But if you are on a good side of the force, you get paid to do this stuff, right? It's really cool.
Yeah, things are changing, and we need more and more hackers.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually,
that's right.
I have a book called Hacking Portugal. Have you seen that?
Sorry?
I wrote a book. I published on Amazon. It's called Hacking Portugal, from the B-sides.
Oh, for sure?
I've done. Yeah. I had some crazy ideas. So the cool thing is
wait a minute. Was it in 2015?
Probably. B-sides. There's a B-sides. I did a presentation. I think it's still online. There's some cool ideas for Portugal that I still hasn't. I think I talk about creating a Portuguese hacking equivalent of football team, right? I said, let's just go and win competition around the world. Yeah, see the presentation and see the book. They're cool. There's some cool ideas in there. And it's actually on Amazon.
Yeah, no, it was 2016.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Oh, oh my God. Yeah, I was there. Okay.
Were you?
Perfect. I just recognized your handle. I just recognized your handle.
That's funny.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Okay.
But you see, some of those ideas are still like, yet to be done, right? But the power of sharing is I start to have the credibility to say, hey guys, I've been talking about this for a while, and let me know when you want to do this. Actually, maybe just a final comment here. I think there's a massive opportunity for Portugal to be a massive leader in cybersecurity and in LLMs. I think Portugal, from a technology point of view, missed the boat, not just Portugal, but even Europe, you can argue, right? On the internet, on mobile, on the clouds, a lot of this stuff. I think if you combine the fact that we have great people, we are great, I think population, we have a lot of actually mathematics, engineering skills. You have people that can live in amazing locations like the Algarve, I live there, a lot of friends. We have good internet, right? I think we have a great opportunity with LLMs to lead the way and to increase the productivity of the country, but also to provide services to the outside world. So, hey, I'm happy to help, right? Anything I can. But I think there's a big opportunity for Portugal that is beyond the, hey, we got some AI stuff. I think this is like, we need companies and governments and agencies and departments and municipalities, whatever, to embrace almost an AI or LLM, probably a better word, LLM first kind of, strategy that kickstarts a whole thing and makes us way more productive. Because look, coming from England, I have to say, look, I go to the Loja do Cidadão, right, the Portuguese shop, and I'm very proud, right? Like, you guys slag it off left, right, and center. I'm saying, hey, dude, I don't have this in England, right? You should see the shit show that is here to get a passport, right? And to do all sorts of stuff. And, it's, so to have a place that has centralized every single part of the citizen in one location is an awesome invention, right? So we just need to make it a bit better.
Yeah, I'm genuinely impressed because last time I went to renew my citizen card, like, it was super fast. It's definitely more efficient than before. I agree. Maybe they are using LLMs already. I don't know.
No, they're not. I also took my passport recently. They need to, but that's the power. If you just apply an LLM to that infrastructure, like, this is the thing about this. LLMs are not magic, right? It's like the cloud. You can't leverage the cloud if you do lift and shift. But if you have good infrastructure, the LLMs allow a glue that was just not possible before. And I think that's the sweet spot. So
the glue.
Cool, man. This is great.
Yeah, no, this was great. Thank you so much for coming. Let's catch up in another time.
Absolutely.
For sure. And again, for those of you that are listening to this episode, don't forget to check the new product that Dinis is building on the sidelines. 𝗕cie, right? What's the name of it?
Yeah. Basically, it's called the Cyber Boardroom. And
cyberboardroom.com. Yeah. Don't forget to check it. And also, if you work in a company and you want to detect your vulnerabilities, don't forget to try Ethiack. Available for sign up at ethiack.com. All right.
Brilliant.
Dinis, thank you so much, and see you soon. Peace.
Yeah, see you. Bye.